Hi, it is so wonderful to be part of the Impact series on composers now. It's such a great honor. But more importantly than that, it's so good to be able to talk about creativity. And I believe this festival celebrates creativity. And I often say to people, and this is really true, we don't really think of this, creativity is an innately human activity. It defines us as a species, and it manifests itself in different ways. It manifests itself in speaking words in a unique way, in making visual images, in movement, in dancing, and in music. Music is something that every culture on this planet has, that every culture on this planet has had since the beginning of humanity. And everybody has the ability to make music, to perform music, and to create music. But there are those of us who are aware that we're doing it. I always like to say that I'm a composer, but I'm a self-aware composer because we're all composers. We all can create music. And the word composer is a funny word. There are a lot of people now who say, well, maybe we shouldn't use the word composer. Maybe it creates this weird sense of hierarchy and it's not a word everybody understands. But it's a wonderful word because it simply means someone who puts things together. And in fact, it's also the word used by perfumers. Folks who make perfume are called composers because they put various ingredients together to create sense. And that's what self-aware composers do with sounds. We put those sounds together. I've been creating my own music since I was 9 years old, and I grew up in New York City. The first music I grew up hearing were the pop songs on the radio in the 1970s and the early 1970s. And I thought that was the only music that existed. And I imitated the songs, I sang along with them, and then I created my own songs. And then gradually, I got exposed to other kinds of music. I grew up in Midtown Manhattan, which in a building that was right around the corner from Penn Station and Madison Square Garden, a half a mile from Times Square. Um, I discovered Broadway and Broadway music, and that was a very big deal to me in my preteen and teen years. I actually met Richard Rodgers in person. That was a life-changing event for me to meet somebody whose music affected so many people. Yet I had a real distance from classical music at first because I didn't see and didn't hear how it was connected to my own life. And it was only when I started meeting living composers, people in my community who I didn't know about, who were composers, that I realized that that was something that I could do as well. I went to the High School of Music and Art in Manhattan, at that point in Uptown Manhattan in Harlem on 135th Street. And I even have a cameo, I'm embarrassed to say, in the movie Fame, which was created when I was at the High School of Music and Art. My early mentors there, music teacher Lee Chernoff, who really made me realize that I was, in fact, a composer, and Jim Murphy, a mentor for life who I'm still very close friends with, who's a Cherokee Native American, grew up in Texas, and exposed me and got me to understand music from all over the world and pay attention to other cultures' music. I wound up pursuing a degree in ethnomusicology in graduate school, and I'm really excited to hear all the music of the world and to see and hear these common connections that we all share. One of the things that I got very excited about when hearing all this music from other places was how the music was tuned. And we take tuning for granted, the 12-tone equal temperament on a guitar, a fretted guitar, or on a piano when it's in tune. Although now in the pandemic, probably most of our pianos are out of tune. They're in different tunings. I actually grew up exposed to upright pianos that were out of tune. I didn't realize it at the time. And I think it attracted me to intervals that are beyond the ones that we consider the normal standard ones. And I wanted to share with you a bit of one of my earlier pieces, a piece called Oasis, which is an attempt to explore wrong keys in just intonation. Just intonation is the scale derived from all the intervals of the overtone series that works in one key, but when you play in other keys, it doesn't work. So I thought, what if you created music in those other keys, those keys that don't work? And this was originally a piece I did myself with a live keyboard and various synthesizers and delay systems, and it was very clunky, very awkward, and I've morphed it into a piece for four hands on electric keyboards, and it works much better that way. This is from a performance in Pittsburgh at the Andy Warhol Museum featuring the Ray Calais duo. And this was part of the Beyond Microtonal Festival that Matthew Rosenblum coordinated in Pittsburgh, I guess about 5 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago at this point. Oasis, let's listen to some of that. Once you realize that tuning has infinite possibilities, it opens up this world, a whole new world of sounds. The same is true for rhythms. You know, it's wonderful that we all waltz to waltzes and march to marches, but there are so many other rhythms as well. I've long been interested in rhythms that involve 5 beats per measure, and people think it's unnatural, but look, we have 5 fingers on our hands, and so 5 is something that's just as natural as 2 or 3 or 4. And so it's really about possibilities and hearing stuff, and getting people to hear these things and to be aware of all of these different sonic possibilities. I think that when you're self-aware as a composer, you have a responsibility. You have a responsibility in the music that you create to get people to listen. I think that listening is perhaps the single most valuable activity, and it's what we can instill in others. I feel like in our society today, people don't listen to each other, and that's why we are so divided. And if people stopped to listen, I tell composers all the time, it's more important to listen than to even to make your own music. And if you want people to listen to your music, you have to listen as well. And two very big life-changing events happened to me in the late 1990s. One was I came to work at the American Music Center, which eventually became New Music USA. I'm still there 22 years later. I was brought there by Richard Kessler to create a web magazine for contemporary American music, a web magazine called New Music Box, which has been online since May 1st, 1999. And it opened me to a universe of composers. There were so many composers I had never heard of before and who I discovered. It was a very, very humbling experience. And I thought about music a certain way before I was there, and it fundamentally changed me and made me feel that in my own music, I needed to bring all these opposite tendencies that music had together somehow, to somehow reconcile serialism and minimalism, to reconcile more popular music leaning things with more esoteric experimental leaning things. And that's what I've tried to do in my own music. The other thing was meeting a painter named Lucio Pozzi, who approached me asking me to create an opera with him based on the life of George Maciunas, the founder of Fluxus, and who is a Lithuanian immigrant to the United States, and basically helped invent the Soho gallery system, and was this real avatar of the avant-garde, but at the same time was very old-fashioned in his way. He was always sort of dressed formally, and strangely, he was a visual artist, but he was colorblind. I thought, how do I convey that in music? And Lucio is a painter, is a very interesting painter, is a polystylistic painter who would do abstract paintings in 4 colors, but then also do figurative paintings, these large, massive landscapes of people. And that really had a big impact when I decided to work with him on the music I would create for this, that it would somehow reconcile all these opposite things. But the first thing I had to figure out was how to convey Maciunas's color blindness musically. Well, to me, the equivalent of color blindness is tone deafness. And the other thing I learned about Maciunas is that he loved Monteverdi. He loved Baroque music. So my idea was to create a character who was Monteverdi sung by Johnny Rotten. He sings on one note for the entire opera. And to make him different from all of the rest of the cast, everyone else in the cast is a woman. He is the only male singer, and he sings on one note. And only one of the singers actually sings his note. They sing in his key, but they don't sing his note. So you get these very strange things happening in the music. The entire opera was staged. We called it a performance oratorio. It combines singing, dancing, film projections, and it's based on Lucio's idea of 4 colors. So it's in 4 parts: yellow, green, red, and blue. We're going to give you a taste of each of those. Yellow is Maciunas's childhood in Lithuania. Green is a refugee camp, an American refugee camp in Germany at the end of World War II, where Maciunas and his family were rescued by the American soldiers. 3, the third act, red, is the creation of Soho in Manhattan in the 1960s, the creation of the art neighborhood there. And the final act, blue, is a hospital bed in Boston Hospital, where Maciunas died at quite a young age. And we'll give you a taste of each of these 4 acts. This was done at the Contemporary Art Museum in Vilnius, Lithuania. The entire space was emptied, and each act was done in a different space within the museum, and the singers, the instrumentalists, the dancers, the film projectors went from room to room, as did the audience, carrying their folded chairs with them. And we'll hopefully give you a taste of what that was like in 2005 in August, conducted by Donatas Katkus with the Christopher Chamber Orchestra. words always help in terms of figuring out what the music should be. This music without words really is on its own. You can't really say that a certain chord signifies a table, or a certain instrumental combination signifies I'm hungry for dinner now. But words can do that. And I feel like another obligation of a composer when you set words is to really pay attention to what those words are, what they're saying. They have music in them, and their meanings have musical meanings. And that's what I tried to convey in a choral work. Central City Chorus asked me on their 35th anniversary to write a piece commemorating their 35th anniversary. So I immediately thought to myself, what was I doing 35 years before then? And as luck would have it, I was singing in the High School of Music and Arts senior chorus with my friend Charles Passy, who is now a journalist for the Wall Street Journal, writing about food and wine and finance, but he's also an extraordinary poet. So I set 3 of his poems. And since it was the 35th anniversary of Central City Chorus, I thought, well, the first one should have 7 beats per measure and 5 different pitches, be pentatonic and 7 beats. The second one should be 5 beats and have 7 notes per measure. So 7 times 5, 5 times 7, both are 35. And the last movement, 6 beats, 6 pitches, because after the 35th anniversary, you start immediately thinking of your 36th year. So here's a little snippet from the Central City Chorus conducted by Philip Chia performing Counting Time in Central City. So it's easy when you're setting a text by a contemporary of yours, a friend, or somebody who's alive now. But what happens if you set a text from somebody from another time period? How do you remain true to their voice and also true to your own? The ASCAP Foundation Charles Kingsford Fund commissioned me to write a song cycle, and I decided to explore the texts, poetry, the lines. He actually used the word poetry to describe his work, of Stephen Crane, who most people know from the novel The Red Badge of Courage. He wrote these amazing poems at the end of the 19th century that are extremely radical. They're all in capital letters. They all kind of stream across the page, but they're these strange dialogues that somehow have a foot reaching into the 20th century, but are very much part of Crane's own late 19th century. So I created a piece of music that does a lot of experimental things, but hopefully were all things that were possible in the 19th century. And it's called Versions of the Truth. A lot of his poetry and his prose deals with this whole notion of truth being elusive. You know, now that we're living in this era of alternative facts, Stephen Crane is strangely prophetic of our time. And I should point out, I wrote this piece 9 years ago, and this world premiere performance that you're about to hear a piece of happened exactly 8 years ago today. So long before this strange era of alternative facts accusing people of fake news. But I think there's a lot in Crane. And as I said before, I think if we listen carefully and read carefully and listen carefully and watch carefully, we can be aware of the pitfalls that can befall us as a society. We can learn to understand each other better and avoid these quagmires of distrust and untruths. This is the Chia Chan duo. Philip Chia, once again, this time as a singer, a dual-voiced singer, both a baritone and male soprano, and Trudy Chan, who's also my wife, on the piano. They're an extraordinary duo, and I wanted to write a song cycle specifically for them because they brought to life my earliest song cycle, which for decades singers and pianists claimed were completely unplayable. So settings of sonnets by my mentor Jim Murphy, and they did it, and I wanted to write a piece that was specifically written for them. So this is a bit of Versions of the Truth.
Once there came a man who said, rage me, all men of the wooden race. And instantly there was terrific clamor among the people against being reached in rows. There was a loud quarrel worldwide. It endured for ages. I saw a man pursue the horizon, I was distant of this. I accosted the man in this good time. I said, you can never, you lie,
We're running low on time here. I want to give just a little taste of a solo clarinet piece I did called Spurl, which is in a 13 limit just intonation scale, 8 pitches per octave, only based on overtones, no words this time. So it is merely the music alone, a solo voice. I was always afraid of writing a piece for a solo instrument. I always felt like it was music -1 without the music. And so I was inspired by J.S. and C.P.E. Bach, who wrote these amazing sonatas for solo flute, where there's harmony in melody, and this is new harmonies with this very unusual scale. Spurl, which was inspired by a word in a story by Roald Dahl, which I'll let you look up. say the last 4 years have been very difficult for me as a composer. I've really felt like the zeitgeist was discouraging the kind of music I wanted to create because I didn't want to create music that was deaf to the zeitgeist, but I also didn't want to create music that I felt was ugly. And I felt like the zeitgeist these last 4 years has been incredibly ugly. And then the pandemic hit. And right before the pandemic, I was asked by my friend, the conductor, Delta David Geyer, who conducts the South Dakota Symphony Orchestra, to write a piece for them for their 2021 season. And I said, wow, I don't know if I can write an orchestra piece. I'm in this very weird mental state with all of this stuff. And I said, I have to visit South Dakota, find some kind of connection. The pandemic hit. I obviously couldn't visit South Dakota, and I struggled. And these last few months, last March, I had an idea for a piece that was about this sense of stasis. I'd been living in my home in self-imposed house arrest, as we all have been, and every day was starting to feel the same. I thought, how do I convey that in music? There was a line in this wonderful poem by the Black American poet Lorenzo Thomas that struck me. Already yesterday or still tomorrow was the line. And I thought that really conveys this sense, but how do I convey that in music when music is all about forward motion of time? So I really tried to create music that gives this elusive sense of going somewhere and not going anywhere at the same time. And then my mother died of the coronavirus, and I couldn't work on this at all. I just sat at the piano and played this dirge-like music, and I couldn't really think of writing for orchestra. And months went by, and it dawned on me that that dirge-like music was part of this piece also. And so this piece became at once this attempt to convey this weird stasis that we all feel and really build toward the catharsis of this incredible human tragedy. More than 2 million people have now died from this. So this is from the world premiere of Already Yesterday or Still Tomorrow, the South Dakota Symphony Orchestra, conducted by Delta David Geyer. want to thank everybody for listening. And I want to encourage everybody to continue listening to my music, to everyone else's music, to your own music. Make your own music. If you liked what you heard today, I invite you to visit my website, www.fjoteri.com. I want to thank the incredible Trudy Chan, my wife, my life partner, incredible pianist, an incredible source of inspiration, who also cut all the video clips that we saw today and heard today. I want to thank all of the folks at Composers Now, to Tanya Leon, who is a constant source of inspiration for me, to Amy Frawley, to Andres Leon, who has been a wonderful partner in the production of making this thing happen just now. And I encourage you to visit my website, visit the website of other composers, check out all the events on Composers Now, listen to music, listen to each other, make your own music, and listen to each other. Thank you.